Look, old man, why are you entitled to boss me around? Do I have to answer that? Mr. Ackerman says so. Well, look at it this way. My restraining you now promises to minimize restrictions imposed upon you through your whole lifetime. Tell me another one. No, really, if I let you learn thievery now, then someday you might be caught. You end up in prison. Not me. I'll be too smart. But that's what they all think, son. Okay, so maybe I'll be caught. So what? I want the bike now. Son, you just don't understand, do you? The pain of eventual imprisonment would far exceed the present pleasures of purloining Eddie's bike. Sorry, Dad, you can't say that to me. Why not? What do you know about it? If I rate the present pleasures of biking higher than the future pain of imprisonment, that's my business. I mean, you don't necessarily know what's good for me any better than I myself know. Old man, where did you learn to talk like this? I told you, from Mr. Ackerman. But I never heard you talk like that before. Well, I never had to engage in neutral dialogue before either. So, do I get to rip off Eddie's bike or not? Well, I gave gentle guidance my best shot. Now it's up to you to decide. I decided 10 minutes ago. Weren't you listening? Well, then go to it, son. I had hoped you would be more like me. But at least you're achieving your own self-definition. Yeah, right. I mean, me too. As you can see from this absurd conversation, ethical relativism is on the brink of anarchy. We need truth in order to coexist, if only in relative harmony. Truth is never private, it is not merely subjective, but it is mind-independent. Truth is mind-independent. But when received, it allows us to cooperate with reality and to think correctly about the world in which we live and move and have our being. But we are schizophrenic, aren't we? We are schizophrenic about truth because we use it on a daily basis when it comes to the likelihood of rain in the afternoon. We use it to check out whether the president-elect has been quoted correctly in the newspaper. But we are, and we remain allergic to the idea, or even the possibility, that our convictions about moral values, about religion, could be wrong. We refuse to accept truth in an objective sense. That has become the agenda, the creed of postmodernism, and particularly so when it may be what we don't want it to be. And truth can be rejected. Truth can be rejected because in its very nature, truth is not coercive. Truth is persuasive. And truth does not force itself upon anyone. It simply makes its case and leaves it to you and to me to embrace it or to reject it. This, by the way, still holds true in the realm of religious truth, which I would say is the ultimate test of this principle, because as we all know, religions tend to produce absolute claims. Jesus Christ makes absolute claims. He says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. That doesn't leave any back doors open. There is no loophole. It is as absolute as can be. And for this reason, Christians have often been called the most intolerant of all people. And for this reason, Christianity has often been called the most intolerant of all religions. Nietzsche actually said that if Christians would still take their God as seriously as they claim, they should still be in the business of burning people at the stake for all of their intolerance. But apart from those who have done this in the history of the church, and apart from those who deserve to be called intolerant, or even worse, let us remember that when being asked by the procurator Pilate whether he was a king, Jesus replied, "My kingdom isn't of this world. And if it was, my servants would take up arms and fight for it." And Jesus never promoted his kingdom by force. And if he had, what's the benefit? What is the benefit? Truth must be received by the individual, and this decision can only be made by the individual, him or herself. Truth is persuasive, not coercive. This being the case, truth presupposes an atmosphere of tolerance in which truth claims that the claims of groups or individuals can be scrutinized and evaluated on their own merits. In such a scenario, or in such a dialogue, not a neutral dialogue in a moral vacuum, no one, neither you nor I, no one has the right not to be criticized for his or her opinions, or truths, if you will. There isn't even such a thing as the most popular notion, namely a right not to be offended by other people's values. And that brings us to tolerance. It seems as though being intolerant is the cardinal sin of this day and age, isn't it? And this scenario is the result of, I would argue, a deliberate redefinition of the meaning of this word. Now, it used to mean, and that is still what you will find in a dictionary, putting up with the objectionable for the sake of a higher good, or at least putting up with the objectionable for the sake of a good of equal value, and then the situation needs to be evaluated. There needs to be some negotiation of the circumstances. So, I had a friend in high school, as some of you know, who was an avid eater of his own boogers. He would fish these boogers out of his nostrils, enlarged nostrils, because of diligent harvesting. And he would eat them. He would eat them in private, and he would eat them in public. In public, it could happen that some people voiced their disgust at what they beheld. And he always treated their comments as opinions that they were entitled to hold. In this comical and almost absurd situation, an air of tolerance prevailed, though. Because the people who took offense at what they saw had an intuitive understanding that the freedom to do as you like with your own boogers still outweighs the feeling of disgust elicited in those who object. Now, that judgment would have been decidedly different, as you all know, if that man had been cultivating the habit of eating people's pets or even children. You may say then that tolerance is not forbearance from judgment. Tolerance is the result of judgment, or the fruit of it. Tolerance is the result of a proper weighing or valuation of goods. But the new definition of tolerance is quite different, isn't it? Now, to be truly tolerant, I must agree that another person's position is just as valid as my own or as anyone's. It isn't enough to say you are entitled to your own opinion and you are entitled to voice it in the marketplace. But I must also say that another person's position is just as valid as anyone's. In other words, mere verbal dissent can, under certain circumstances, and you know this is true, this is how we handle this, can, under certain circumstances, already constitute intolerance. I must give my approval or endorsement to another person's position. And this is so because truth, as we say, is like beauty. It's in the eyes of the beholder. But as I said earlier, if there is no real truth, there is no reason for Martin Emmrich to be tolerant. Because no one can place any limits on tolerance. Tolerance needs truth in order to be or to become a coherent concept in public life. Anyone enamored with relativism, as I used to be, but anyone enamored with relativism only should pause and ask themselves if they have any moral expectations that their legal rights be respected by others. And even a sliver of honesty would lead me to the conclusion that yes, I do protest to being arrested arbitrarily by the police, and I do protest against being brutalized and mugged. Doesn't everyone? Even the staunchest relativist can be expected to act like the OSU student who stands here on campus on an orange box with a stash of flyers in hand saying, "Anarchy, here and now for 25 cents a piece." Comes a professor and takes them and walks away. And the student yells after him, "Hey, it's 25 cents a piece!" And the professor turns around and smiles and says, "Well, this is your first lesson in anarchy." Tolerance is an aspect of truth. It is if you will, a thread in the tapestry of truth. But if we tolerate everything, then the ethic of tolerance itself becomes fair game, because we have no grounds on which to proscribe even the most reprehensible conduct. Tolerance calls for limits, and these limits are set by truths of a higher order. Karl Popper calls this the paradox of tolerance, because while it is designed to be the policeman of liberty, to serve and to protect liberty,